In the wake of the heart-wrenching loss of his deeply adored wife, Ella Wilma Castro, the esteemed head of a well-regarded food company, was engulfed by a profound and seemingly endless sorrow. The void left by her absence felt insurmountable, and he was consumed by a pervasive sense of hopelessness. He struggled to fathom the possibility of ever finding love or experiencing joy again. The adage that grief might linger for 3 years seemed to ring all too true, casting a long shadow over his days and nights. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Despite this, Anna, the ever-supportive and loving mother of his late wife, remained a steadfast beacon of hope in his darkened world. With unwavering kindness and gentle encouragement, she would often remind him, "My dear, your precious little Tio needs a mother's love and guidance, and you must carry on with your life. I have faith that one day you will cross paths with a remarkable woman who will not only bring happiness into your life, but will also be a nurturing and devoted mother to our beloved grandson. It's important to open your heart and allow yourself to seek out this new chapter." Then, as if by a stroke of fate, a remarkable change occurred. One fateful day, the young widower's life took a surprising turn when he met Ingrid, a woman whose presence seemed to fill the empty spaces in his heart. As the days turned into a week, he found himself irresistibly drawn to Ingrid's warmth, grace, and unwavering kindness. It was as if she had arrived to breathe new life into his weary soul. Ingrid quickly formed a deep and genuine bond with his 6-year-old son, Tio, whose joyful laughter and bright eyes reflected the promise of a renewed future. The connection between Ingrid and Tio became a powerful testament to the potential for a happy and harmonious family life. Buoyed by the strength of their growing relationship, Wilma realized that Ingrid was the woman he had been hoping for, a partner with whom he could build a new, fulfilling life. A few months later, filled with both hope and excitement, he took the momentous step of proposing to her. Their engagement was a symbol of their shared dreams and the future they envisioned together. Their wedding was a beautiful, emotionally charged celebration that radiated joy and love, a testament to their newfound happiness and commitment. Anna, who had watched their journey with heartfelt anticipation, was overjoyed. Her heart, which had once been heavy with concern, now brimmed with relief and contentment. She expressed her heartfelt emotion, saying, "Now, I can approach the end of my journey with peace, knowing that you and Tio are in such loving and capable hands." Her son, always the light-hearted one, responded with a playful smile, "Mom, you're being overly dramatic. Ingrid and I haven't given you a granddaughter yet, and I'm sure you'll be dancing joyfully at Tio's wedding in the future." After their enchanting honeymoon in the breathtaking Seychelles of paradise that seemed to mirror their newfound happiness, the newlyweds began their life together. According to Wilma, their shared journey was nothing short of magnificent, filled with promise, joy, and the beauty of a love rediscovered. Unfortunately, after some time, Wilma began grappling with a troubling and distressing issue. His beloved son, Tio, seemed to be falling ill with alarming frequency. The once vibrant and energetic child was plagued by a series of illnesses that left Wilma and Ingrid both anxious and perplexed. From persistent runny noses and painful sore throats to recurring bouts of bronchitis, Tio's health was deteriorating, and despite Ingrid's diligent efforts to create a nurturing and health-conscious environment, the pattern of illness continued unabated. One day, amidst their mounting worry and the seemingly endless cycle of sickness, Ingrid proposed a potential solution. Perhaps it would be beneficial to send Tio to a health camp, she suggested gently, her eyes reflecting both concern and hope. Wilma, however, was initially hesitant. "But Tio has never been away from home for such an extended period," he replied thoughtfully, his voice tinged with the deep-seated worry of a concerned father. The idea of sending his young son away from the familiar comforts of home and the loving presence of his family seemed daunting and unsettling. Ingrid, with her characteristic warmth and understanding, countered his concerns. "Well, there's a first time for everything," she said, trying to offer a perspective of optimism and potential. She intended to reassure Wilma that new experiences, while challenging, could also be beneficial. Wilma, however, remained unconvinced. "Yes, but he's only 6 years old," he objected, his voice filled with apprehension. "It feels a bit premature to have him away from his family for such a long stretch. I worry it might be too much for him at such a young age." Ingrid's gaze softened, and she spoke with compassionate conviction. "I understand your worries, truly I do. But I genuinely believe this could be a positive step for Tio. It could help him become more independent, and more importantly, he would benefit from fresh air and a change of environment. Have you considered that perhaps the city life, with its constant hustle and environmental factors, might not be the best for him right now? Sometimes, a new setting can provide the rejuvenation he needs." Her words, filled with hope and an earnest desire to see Tio thrive, aimed to provide a broader perspective on the situation. It was not merely about sending him away, but about giving him a chance to flourish in a different, perhaps more healing environment. "No, I hadn't considered that," Wilma admitted, shaking his head in frustration. "Honey, I'm utterly bewildered. I can't make sense of why Tio is constantly sick now. Everything was perfectly fine before, but now he's perpetually unwell. Despite all my efforts to shield him from viruses, it seems like it's all in vain." Ingrid, her voice quivering with emotion, wiped tears from her eyes as she spoke. "I'm meticulously monitoring Tio's diet and making sure his room is aired regularly. I hate the thought of him being away from us because my love for him is immense. But I can't bear to see him suffering like this. My heart is breaking for the poor boy." Wilma, with a deep frown of concern, suggested, "Maybe we should consider airing his room less frequently. It seems like it might be too cold in there for him." Ingrid shook her head gently. "That's not the issue. The room is cooler, but excessive heat would be worse for him. Fresh air helps to reduce germs and keeps the environment healthier. But I'm not a doctor, and at the camp, Tio would be under the care of medical specialists who are experienced in these matters." Wilma's expression softened as he considered Ingrid's perspective. "Well, maybe you're right," he said thoughtfully. "Perhaps sending Tio to a health camp isn't such a bad idea after all. I'll seriously consider it. Thank you, my dear, for all the care and effort you're putting into helping my son." With a renewed sense of hope, Wilma began researching various options for children's health camps. He soon discovered a camp that seemed promising and reached out to the administration. On the phone, a woman with a warm, reassuring voice provided more details. "We offer an individualized approach for each child," she explained. "The minimum stay is 2 months to ensure that we can provide the comprehensive care each child needs." This new information sparked a flicker of optimism in Wilma. The prospect of Tio receiving specialized attention and the potential benefits of a different environment gave him a glimmer of hope amidst the ongoing challenge of his son's health struggles. 2 months, Wilma repeated in a voice laden with defeat. The thought of being separated from his son for such a long time was almost unbearable. Although he didn't fully grasp the need for the extended stay at the camp, the idea of being apart from Tio for even a single month felt like an insurmountable hurdle. "Yes, 2 months," the administrator confirmed with a calm and reassuring tone. "But don't worry, you're welcome to visit your child any day that suits you." "That's somewhat comforting," Wilma responded with a touch of relief. "And how do I go about enrolling him?" The administrator patiently walked him through the enrollment process, providing all the necessary information. With everything in place, Wilma's primary task was to prepare Tio for the upcoming 2-month adventure. He had expected his son to be apprehensive, but to his astonishment, Tio's face brightened with enthusiasm. "Will I get to play with other kids there?" the boy asked, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Wilma felt a pang of sadness mixed with understanding. He knew that Tio had been missing out on the social interactions that were so vital at his age. Tio had previously attended school, but a series of persistent colds had led Wilma to withdraw him from class. Ingrid's suggestion of the health camp, it seemed, was indeed a well-considered idea, no matter how daunting it seemed. However, just a week before the planned departure, an unexpected setback occurred. Tio began complaining of a severe headache, and upon touching his forehead, Wilma was alarmed to find it radiating intense heat, akin to a hot stove. The thermometer confirmed his fears with a temperature nearing 40 degrees Celsius. "Oh God, this is the last thing we need," he muttered in despair, feeling utterly defeated as he sank heavily into a nearby chair. Indeed, having heard her husband's distressed exclamation, entered the room with concern etched on her face. "What's the matter?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. "Tio is sick again," Wilma explained, his voice thick with anxiety. "And it looks like it's quite serious this time." Ingrid's gaze fell on Tio, who was now visibly flushed and beginning to sweat profusely. Her brow furrowed with deep concern as she took in the sight of the ailing child, her heart aching at the sight of his suffering. The situation was quickly becoming more urgent and fraught with uncertainty. "It seems we'll need to postpone the trip," Wilma said resolutely, a note of frustration and concern in his voice. "We need to take Tio to the doctor right away." Ingrid, her expression a mix of hope and apprehension, countered, "Are you sure? We still have a week before we're scheduled to leave. Perhaps Tio will improve on his own." Despite her hopes, the following day brought no signs of recovery. Tio's condition remained grim, and the doctor delivered the disheartening news that the planned trip was no longer feasible. "I strongly recommend that you employ a qualified nurse," the doctor advised, his tone both professional and concerned. Ingrid, already overwhelmed by the situation, voiced her frustration as the doctor departed. "Why do we need a nurse? Why would we need a stranger in our home?" Wilma, his patience thin in the face of his son's serious health issues, interjected firmly. "Do you have any medical training?" His tone brooked no argument. When it came to the well-being of his son, Wilma was unwavering in his decisions. Ingrid shook her head, her voice subdued. "No, I don't." "Then this discussion is over," Wilma declared, his decision made. "Tonight, I'll visit the agency's website and arrange for a nurse." Recognizing the finality in her husband's tone, Ingrid did not press the issue further and nodded in agreement. "All right," Wilma said, his voice softening slightly. "I need to head to the office now. Please take care of Tio. If there's any emergency, don't hesitate to call me with that." Wilma headed to work, his thoughts heavily burdened by the situation at home. After tackling some urgent tasks at the office, he hurried back home, his heart aching with concern. Although he had complete trust in Ingrid's capabilities, the anxiety of not being there for Tio weighed heavily on him. Being near his son, even if it meant merely providing moral support, gave him a sense of reassurance and calm amidst the turmoil. As Wilma drove over the bridge, his attention was abruptly drawn to a young girl standing perilously close to the edge of the railing. She was poorly dressed, her clothes tattered and mismatched, and her demeanor conveyed a deep-seated despair. Wilma's heart raced as he watched her swing one leg over the railing, clearly contemplating a tragic leap. Without a second thought, he slammed on the brakes, the car screeching to a halt as he leaped out of the vehicle. "What on earth are you doing?" Wilma shouted, his voice echoing with urgency and alarm. He rushed forward, gripping the girl's arm and pulling her back from the edge. "Are you so exhausted with life that you're ready to throw it all away?" The girl, her face streaked with tears, looked up at him with hollow eyes. "Yes," she sobbed. "I'm just so tired. This isn't life, it's only suffering." Wilma's heart ached at the sight of her despair. "Come on, let's get you into the car," he said firmly but gently. After a moment of hesitation, the girl reluctantly followed him to the car, her shoulders slumped in defeat. Once she was settled inside, Wilma tried to ease the tension. "What's your name?" he asked, his tone softening with concern. "Corey," she replied in a barely audible voice, her eyes still downcast. "Corey," Wilma repeated, trying to offer some comfort. "Why does such a young and beautiful girl like you feel that life is nothing but suffering?" "I'm pregnant," Corey whispered, her voice breaking as she choked back a fresh wave of tears. Wilma's expression shifted to one of deep concern. "Wow, congratulations," he said, his voice filled with reproach. "So not only have you decided to end your suffering, but also to forsake the future of your innocent child." "My fiancé left me," Corey continued to weep, her words trembling with pain. "I trusted him completely, and he betrayed me in the worst way." Wilma nodded, absorbing the gravity of her situation. "I understand," he said, "but that still doesn't justify ending your life or your child's. There must be another way." "It's easy for you to say," Corey sighed, her voice tinged with hopelessness. "I have no one to turn to, and I have no place to go." "What about your parents?" Wilma inquired, hoping to uncover any potential sources of support. Corey shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "My father left when I was just 2 years old. My mother raised me alone until she met Bob when I was 14. Bob moved in with us in the village and helped with repairs around the house. For a while, things seemed stable, and we were grateful for his support. But that only lasted for 3 months. Then Bob started drinking heavily, and his bouts of drunkenness stretched on for months, making everything worse." Wilma listened intently, his heart heavy with sympathy for Corey's plight. Her story revealed a painful cycle of abandonment and instability, culminating in her current, desperate situation. It was clear that she was overwhelmed and needed support, not just for herself but for the child she was carrying. "Mom, why don't you just kick him out?" Corey pleaded with her mother. "Why do you need him around?" Her mother, her voice weak and filled with a sense of resignation, replied, "You wouldn't understand. Even though he's far from perfect, he's still mine." Sadly, her mother's condition deteriorated rapidly. Diagnosed with terminal cancer in its 4th stage, she withered away like a candle burning out, leaving Corey with an unbearable sense of loss and abandonment within a matter of months. With her mother gone, Corey was left to face Bob, her stepfather, who remained in the house. "I'm registered here," Bob asserted with a stubborn defiance, "so I'm not going anywhere." Although Corey was deeply unsettled by Bob's presence, who felt like a mere stranger to her, she had no choice but to tolerate him. Bob's claim of residency meant that he was legally entitled to stay, no matter how unwelcome he was. Amid this turmoil, Corey found solace in a new relationship. She met Steve, and the young couple decided to rent an apartment and start a life together. However, the joy of their new beginning was short-lived. When Corey's pregnancy became known, Steve's reaction was far from supportive. His disapproval and frustration led to an untenable situation, and Corey found herself once again displaced, forced to leave the apartment. Returning to her mother's house, Corey was met with another devastating blow. The home had burned to the ground. Bob claimed it was due to faulty wiring, but Corey harbored a deep suspicion that it was more likely caused by his reckless habit of smoking in bed. "I was at my wit's end," she recounted with a tremor in her voice. "I had nowhere to go and no one to turn to for help." As the narrative unfolded, doubts about Corey's situation began to arise. Ingrid's voice rang with skepticism. "How do you know what kind of trouble she's in? Maybe she had debts or other issues we don't know about. What do you know about her beyond what she's told you?" Wilma, reflecting on Ingrid's pointed observations, knew she had a valid point. Despite his inherent trust in people, the reality was that one could not always judge the full truth of a person's circumstances from their words alone. Corey's situation was indeed precarious, and though it was painful to acknowledge, the possibility that she might have resorted to theft or other desperate measures could not be dismissed. After her conversation with Wilma, Ingrid indulged in a glass of chilled white wine, complemented by exotic fruits, savoring a sense of vindictive satisfaction. She relished in the notion that her scheming had borne fruit, and in her mind she silently mocked Corey's misfortune. "You've had the comfort of a decent home and the luxury of clean sheets," Ingrid thought with a cruel smirk. "Now it's time for you to return to your pitiful existence." Later that evening, as Ingrid entered Tio's room, the little boy looked up with innocent curiosity. "Where's Corey?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. With a dismissive shrug, Ingrid responded, "Corey doesn't work for us anymore." She moved to open the window, a gesture that seemed to carry her hidden agenda. Why? Tio's voice quivered with confusion and worry. "Because your precious Corey stole my money," Ingrid declared with malicious satisfaction in her tone. "No, you're lying," Tio protested vehemently. "Corey is good. You're bad." His eyes glistened with tears as he struggled to process the betrayal. Ingrid's grin widened, a reflection of her cold-hearted glee. "If you choose not to believe it, that's your problem," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Please close the window," Tio requested, shivering slightly. "I'm cold." "Fine," Ingrid acquiesced after a brief moment of hesitation and closed the window with a huff. The following day, Tio's health took a turn for the worse. He complained weakly, "I feel terrible." Ingrid's irritation was palpable as she rolled her eyes. "What's wrong with you now?" she snapped. Tio's face was flushed, and his eyes shone with a feverish glow. "Can I have the syrup?" Tio asked softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Syrup? You don't even know what kind of syrup you need," Ingrid retorted with a touch of exasperation. Her frustration was evident as she scolded him. "Why did you kick Corey out?" Tio's question was met with a stern reprimand. "I've already told you," Ingrid said sharply. "She's a thief. Don't bring her up again. Do you understand?" Tio, despite his young age, had an innate understanding of the situation. He realized that pleading further would be futile. "It's better to wait for Daddy," Ingrid said curtly as she handed over the syrup before leaving the room. She made a half-hearted attempt to open the window, but refrained when Tio's shivering made it clear that he was too cold. As days passed, Tio's condition deteriorated. It wasn't just the illness that was wearing him down, it was the profound sense of abandonment and betrayal. Corey had been the only one who had shown him genuine care and compassion. Although his father loved him deeply, his work commitments kept him away from home. Ingrid, on the other hand, was indifferent to his needs. Her primary concern was her comfort and access to Wilma's resources. Tio felt increasingly isolated, realizing that his stepmother's affection was a mere facade, hiding her true priorities behind a veneer of false concern. Following her abrupt and dishonorable departure from her previous job, Corey found herself plunging into a harsh and unforgiving reality. With nowhere else to turn, she spent 2 bleak nights in a cramped hostel, clinging to the hope that somewhere in the vast world, there might still be compassionate souls willing to offer her refuge. Desperation gnawed at her as she wandered the streets, contemplating how she might find someone willing to take her in, perhaps a loan or an offer to exchange her labor for a place to stay. But as hours turned into days, her hope dimmed with each passing moment. The world seemed indifferent to her plight, and finding a place to call home felt increasingly impossible. Determined not to succumb to despair, Corey pressed on. She decided to revisit the neighborhood where she and Steve had once lived, a district notorious for its high crime rate and notorious reputation. It was a place where rental prices were lower, not because of affordability but due to the area's unappealing reputation. Miraculously, or rather, through a cruel twist of fate, Corey managed to secure a small apartment. Yet luck seemed to have a bitter taste, for the man who agreed to rent her the tiny, dilapidated space was a notorious drunkard living in the adjacent unit. The apartment was a decrepit haven, its walls cloaked in layers of grime and its air thick with the stench of stale cigarette smoke. Despite the grim conditions, it was still a roof over her head, and in Corey's dire situation, it was a small consolation. The drunk landlord, with an air of disheveled authority, declared, "I expect the rent in a month." Corey nodded in agreement, her heart sinking at the thought of managing to gather the money amidst her precarious circumstances. She hoped to secure work quickly, knowing that she had to keep her pregnancy a secret from any potential employers to avoid discrimination. The landlord's frequent visits, always with the same grating demand for money, only added to her growing anxiety. "But it hasn't been a month yet, has it?" she would respond, aware that the man's persistence likely stemmed from his own need for alcohol rather than genuine concern. Eventually, fortune seemed to smile upon her as she landed a job at a food delivery service. The administrator's announcement that wages were paid weekly brought a glimmer of hope to Corey's otherwise bleak existence. She felt a surge of relief at the prospect of a steady income and began to dream of filling her fridge and setting aside money for rent. For a brief, shining moment, everything seemed to be falling into place. However, just as quickly as hope had rekindled, it was snatched away. One fateful day, while navigating the demands of her new job, Corey was struck by a sudden wave of illness. As she staggered out of the shopping center, burdened with heavy bags of groceries meant for delivery, her strength gave out, and she collapsed. Panic surged through the workplace as the administrator hurriedly called for an ambulance, leaving Corey's fragile world hanging in the balance. In that moment of vulnerability, the reality of her situation hit her hard. Her hard-earned stability seemed to crumble, and the future that had briefly looked promising now appeared uncertain and fraught with challenges. The sight of his son's diminished and frail condition was a shocking blow to Wilmer. The boy's once vibrant presence had been replaced by a sickly and wan frame, a painful reminder of the distressing circumstances. Wilmer's heart ached at Tio's plaintive question. The boy's longing for Corey, the one person who had shown him genuine care and affection, was evident and heart-wrenching. "Dad, can Corey come back?" Tio's tear-streaked face and quivering voice made Wilmer's resolve waver. He felt a deep pang of regret for the decision that had driven Corey away. Seeing his son in such a state made Wilmer question the wisdom of his actions. The notion that Corey, despite the accusations against her, was still the only person who had shown Tio real compassion was difficult to ignore. Wilmer glanced at Ingrid, seeking some sign of empathy or understanding, but found only her stern nod confirming the narrative of Corey as a thief. The weight of this situation and the consequences of his decision began to settle heavily on Wilmer's shoulders. He felt torn between the desire to protect his son and the necessity of upholding his decisions. "Sonny," Wilmer said softly, kneeling beside Tio's bed, "I would love for her to come back, but it's impossible right now." His voice faltered, unable to fully convince himself or his son. "We have to find another way to help you feel better." As Wilmer watched Tio's face fall, he felt an overwhelming sense of guilt. He knew that despite Ingrid's insistence on Corey's guilt, he had to dig deeper into the situation. He decided he needed to find out more about Corey's side of the story and to make amends if necessary. "Ingrid," Wilmer said with a resolute tone, "I need to speak with Corey. I need to understand what happened. I've seen how much Tio misses her and how much he needs her. If there's even a chance that we've made a mistake, I want to correct it." Ingrid's face hardened at Wilmer's decision. "You think you can just undo this? She stole from us." "Perhaps she did," Wilmer replied, "but the situation is more complicated than we thought. It's clear that Tio needs her, and if there's any way to make things right, I intend to find it." Wilmer resolved to visit Corey and listen to her side of the story, determined to make an informed decision about her return. Meanwhile, Ingrid's lingering resentment and Tio's fragile health remained pressing concerns. The family's dynamics had shifted dramatically, and it was clear that finding a resolution required more than just decisions. It required understanding and compassion. Wilmer's heart lifted with renewed hope as he followed the woman's directions. The shabby building she had pointed out looked every bit as dilapidated as the rest of the neighborhood, but Wilmer was determined to find Corey. He approached the building, his steps echoing in the empty hallway as he made his way to the first floor. When he reached the door, he hesitated for a moment before knocking. There was a long pause before he heard shuffling inside. The door creaked open, revealing Corey with tired eyes and a face marked by the hardships she had endured. "Corey," Wilmer asked gently, trying to soften the impact of his unexpected appearance. Corey's eyes widened in surprise and apprehension. "Mr. Wilmer, what are you doing here?" "I've come to talk," Wilmer said, his voice filled with concern. "Tio misses you, and there's been a lot of misunderstanding. I need to hear your side of the story." Corey hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside to let Wilmer in. The small apartment was stark and bare, a testament to Corey's struggle. She offered him a seat on an old, worn-out chair and sat across from him. "I don't know where to start," Corey said quietly. "I never wanted any of this. I just needed to get by. And when I lost my job and ended up in the hospital, everything fell apart." Wilmer listened intently as Corey recounted her situation, her struggles with the landlord, her illness, and the challenges of finding a place to stay. She described the difficulties she faced and how her situation had spiraled out of control. There was no denying the desperation in her voice. "I never stole anything," Corey insisted. "I had some money saved up, but with everything that happened, I couldn't manage. I understand why you might think I did, but it's just not true." Wilmer nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "I need to believe you, Corey. Tio's health and well-being are at stake. He's been asking for you, and Ingrid's insistence on your guilt made it difficult to see things." "I understand," Corey said, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm just trying to make it through each day. I never wanted to cause any trouble for you or T.I." Wilmer felt a pang of guilt and empathy. "I'm sorry for how things turned out. If you're willing, I'd like to offer you a chance to return and work with us again. We need to address Tio's needs, and if you're able to come back, it might help him recover." Corey's eyes filled with hope and relief. "I'd be grateful for that. Thank you for giving me another chance." "I'll speak with Ingrid and see if we can resolve this," Wilmer said. "I want to make things right, and I hope we can find a solution that benefits everyone." As Wilmer left Corey's apartment, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be challenging, but he was determined to reconcile the misunderstandings and ensure that Tio received the care and support he needed. Wilmer's heart ached at Corey's distress. He took a deep breath and tried to offer reassurance. "Don't worry about that. I'm here to help." Corey's eyes were filled with a mix of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Wilmer. I didn't expect this at all." "I want to understand what happened," Wilmer said softly, sitting beside her. "Tell me everything. Why did the landlord treat you so poorly? And why are you in the hospital?" Corey wiped her tears and began recounting the events. The landlord was a heavy drinker, and he had no patience for delays. When I got sick, he demanded the rent immediately, even though I had explained my situation. I had to leave the apartment because I couldn't pay. I ended up here in the hospital after fainting at work. Wilmer listened intently. "I'm sorry you had to go through all this. I want to make things right, both for you and for Tio." Corey nodded, her expression earnest. "I appreciate that. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I just wanted to provide for my baby and myself." Wilmer stood up, feeling a renewed sense of responsibility. "I'll make sure you get the help you need here. And when you're ready to leave the hospital, we'll figure out a solution for your living situation." Corey smiled weakly, her gratitude evident. "Thank you, Mr. Wilmer. You've given me hope when I had none." As Wilmer left the hospital, he felt a sense of resolve. He needed to address the situation with Ingrid and ensure that Corey could return to her job if she was well enough. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was committed to resolving the misunderstandings and providing the support needed for both Tio and Corey. Returning home, Wilmer found Ingrid waiting anxiously. "Did you find her?" she asked. "Yes, I did," Wilmer said firmly. "Corey is in the hospital, recovering from illness. I've paid her rent and will ensure she gets proper care. We need to reconsider our position on this." Ingrid's eyes widened with a mixture of surprise and frustration. "But she's still a thief. How can you just overlook that?" Wilmer's expression was stern. "I've heard her side of the story. There were misunderstandings, and I believe she deserves a chance to make things right. If Tio's health is to improve, we need to make the right decisions. I'm bringing her back to work once she's better. That's final." Ingrid opened her mouth to protest but saw the determination in Wilmer's eyes. Reluctantly, she nodded. "Fine, if that's what you want." Wilmer's mind was already focused on making sure Tio received the care and support he needed and on ensuring that Corey had a chance to rebuild her life. It was a difficult path ahead, but he was prepared to face it with resolve and compassion. "Please don't let this distress you," Wilmer reassured her with gentle warmth. "Everything will turn out just fine. I'm committed to doing everything in my power to set things right. Rest assured, you'll be back at work soon, and everything will fall into place." Corey felt a profound sense of joy and relief, her heart swelling with gratitude. The unwavering support and compassion from Wilmer were immeasurable in their significance. It felt as though the weight of the world could be lifted through a simple act of kindness and empathy. As we conclude today's video, let us pause and ponder the profound lessons we've delved into. From Corey's challenging journey and Tio's enduring strength to the transformative power of compassion and mutual understanding, we have much to reflect upon. What have you learned from this story so far? Is there a particular lesson or insight that stood out to you? We'd love to hear about it. Share in the comments below one thing you've learned and how you plan to bring it into your own life. If you found this video valuable, please leave a comment, like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps us continue creating content that inspires and informs. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing your thoughts and insights.